The thing that would really excite players is the introduction of all this cutting-edge technology that we're just infusing into the sandbox. I think just having the comeback of the helicopter on the battlefield, it just introduces a whole new layer to the sandbox. It just gives players so much more tools that makes it more Battlefield than it's been in a very long time. So we really enable our players to be really, really creative with the tools we give them. And that's what Battlefield is kind of all about. Being in a massive, open war setting and being able to say like, hey, there's a problem over there, go solve it. And the players actually choose how they want to solve that problem, and through that process create their own Battlefield moments.
June 9th, 2021, DICE releases, next to the Battlefield 1 trailer, one of the best trailers they have ever made, and hype for a new Battlefield game is at an all-time high. A modern futuristic setting, crisp, beautiful visuals, new weapons and customization, a variety of new gadgets and vehicles, sandbox elements, and one big angry tornado. A return to form harkening to the days of Battlefield 4, the sky was the limit with 2042, and the future looked bright indeed. 4 months later, and much like the Hindenburg, the sky proved to be too much for Battlefield 2042, with one of the most devastating video game crashes and implosions I've ever experienced. The following months provided disappointment after disappointment for the fanbase, and the future of the entire series seemed to be in jeopardy. And now here we are, 1 year later, somehow, as the last few years has made time lose all meaning, and the question remains, has 2042 experienced a rebirth? Has it had a comeback or improvements to the level of Battlefield 4? My answer is a resounding and definitive
no.
Not even close. While I think it's improved in many ways, it still falls flat in many other critically important ways that at this point we just need to accept will never be addressed. This is going to be a brutal video, but if you find yourself enjoying it, make sure to like and subscribe for more, or if you don't, a dislike, and let me know why in the comments. I'm always looking to improve. If you can't tell by my channel content, I'm a Battlefield fanboy through and through, and these types of videos bring me no joy outside of the joy of content creation. It's just really, really sad to see one of my favorite franchises of all time in the current state that it's in. Battlefield 2042 has turned out to be a huge disappointment, not only to the legacy of the Battlefield franchise, but just as a video game and FPS in general. A failure at launch, a failure of a live service model, and a failure where it matters most, in our hearts. Admittedly, my initial impressions were really not that bad, and I have had some fun and still have fun in almost every mode over the past 12 months, as there's diamonds to be found in this rough. Portal can produce some genuine fun. The shooting and movement mechanics, overall jankiness and bugs aside, are really not that bad, and some of the new mechanics were pretty novel and cool, like the wingsuit or grappling hook at first. More intelligent people than me recognized, though, the deep flaws almost immediately, and I admit I was a bit on the hype train, and although I was disappointed in many ways, I still had some good feelings about 2042 immediately after launch. However, as the weeks and months passed with no new content being delivered, snail-paced fixes of new bugs being introduced, the lack of many staple Battlefield features, and horrible game-breaking issues such as optimization and mouse input remaining unfixed, those good feelings faded slowly, leaving me a broken husk of what I once was. Okay, that's a bit dramatic, but seriously, the deep-seated flaws in 2042 just kind of ground me down over time, and now it's really, really difficult to return even with some of the latest improvements. The game is nowhere near the quality we did and should expect of a studio like DICE, which used to be on the bleeding edge of visual, audio, and animation design. The DICE of Battlefield 3, 4, and 1 is apparently long gone, and much like myself these days, a hollow shell of what it used to be. So with that joyful transition, what's happened with 2042 since launch? Well, it's at the same time lots of things and almost nothing. At its core, it's still a sad shadow of past Battlefield experiences, and that is unlikely to ever change. But that is not to downplay some of the hard work of those few remaining developers still assigned to the support of 2042. I say few because I'm convinced that a small skeleton crew at DICE has been tasked with the delivery and support of the guaranteed 4 seasons worth of content. with the majority of teams being shifted to the next Battlefield title. DICE has denied that this is the case, of course, but honestly, I don't know what would be worse, if this is truly what the full development teams at DICE can deliver, or if support for 2042 is as thin and lifeless as Jack Skellington. DICE has seemingly all but abandoned 2042 at this point, and is apparently only interested in delivering the bare minimum to avoid liability and the complete destruction of any goodwill that may be left with the community. Of course, this hasn't been explicitly stated, but the proof is in the pudding. Since launch 1 year ago, 2042 has had 2 new maps added. I will repeat that. Since launch 1 year ago, 2042 has had 2 new maps. In addition to these 2 new maps, we've seen 10 new weapons, 6 of which are just ported over from Portal in broken, buggy states, 4 new vehicles, 2 of which are essentially the same helicopter, 2 new specialists, and 2 new gadgets. In comparison, at this point in its lifecycle, Battlefield 4 had received 20 new maps. Yes, 10 times as many as 2042, 22 new weapons, 9 new vehicles, 4 new game modes, and 8 new gadgets. Now you might pause here and say, but Pungles, what about quality versus quantity? Surely those 2 new maps are as good or better than the 20 Battlefield 4 maps, right? Well, if you've played any of Battlefield 4's DLCs, you know that this is not the case, and in fact, it's not even really close. It is both less quantity and substantially less quality, as the seasonal content for 2042 is just as buggy and unpolished as the rest of the game. Exposure is pretty good, I'll give him that. I'll touch on it later, but I think that is genuinely a good Battlefield map, but Stranded is complete chaos, lacking any semblance of flow or solid design of both Conquest and Breakthrough. And there's almost no destruction to speak of at all on the entire map. It's just an assortment of indestructible and endless shipping container assets strewn about to give the perception of detail, cover, and clutter. It's definitely not the worst map in 2042, not by a long shot, but considering it's our second one in an entire year, it's a travesty. Every new weapon introduced in Season 2 was bugged. Yes, every single one. It's all free, I'll give you that, but if this level of live service is the result of losing premium, then DICE, please give me back premium. I didn't love how it could split the player base, but it's certainly better than this drip-fed, underwhelming, and underbaked level of content. It would be one thing if the new content, especially maps, weren't especially needed because of how high quality the base content was, but we all know that's not the case here. With base maps as horrendous as 2042's, something drastic needed to be added to get us away from those empty, barren landscapes, and while Exposure and Stranded are both better than the base maps, certainly, I was personally burned out on both with just a few days of playing them over and over and over on season launch. DICE has actually acknowledged this and updated 3 of the base maps, Renewal, Kaleidoscope, and Orbital, with additional assets and detail work, which is appreciated but still disappointing, as these maps need reworks from the ground up, not just a couple new shipping containers and sandbags thrown into the mix. The rework is literally just them finishing the maps by adding detail art and assets, and has not substantially changed the flow and structure of these maps. And while I think Orbital is probably the best map now, they are all still subpar Battlefield maps. I appreciate that they have at least acknowledged the flaws and made attempts to fix them, but this isn't really a case of being ungrateful or grateful, it's just expectations for a finished and complete video game. It certainly didn't help that Season 1's launch was delayed and didn't start until over 7 months after the launch of the base game, and the preseason updates were also underwhelming. Weekly missions leading up to Season 1 provided skins, which is fine, but it's just spread so thinly and was apparent just how little content DICE had to provide its players. Big ticket items in those early updates included groundbreaking gameplay elements such as a scoreboard, of which the end of round display had to come later, voice over IP, of which I've heard exactly one person use, and receiving experience for doing certain actions, of which there are still many missing. Not exactly earth-shattering updates. To be fair, these updates did include many smaller fixes and tweaks that greatly improved the experience from a UI, UX, and gameplay perspective. So yes, overall, Battlefield 2042 is a much better game and experience than it was a year ago, but it's still not the game I hoped it would be. I know this section has been hyper negative, but it's important to establish just how underwhelming the updates and content delivery for 2042 has been post-release. It's been hashed and rehashed at length, but I really can't make a breakdown of 2042 without discussing how we ended up here and the 2 fundamental flaws in the game's overall design, the specialist system and the map design. It's hard to say which is worse. I lean a bit towards maps due to how critical they are to my enjoyment of a Battlefield experience, but they both aid and abet each other to deliver an extremely frustrating gameplay experience to the player. The loss of defined classes in 2042, in addition to just generally being received universally poorly by the player base, crippled its design. And up until recently, DICE stuck hard to the specialist guns, and I can't really blame them. They're kind of baked deeply into 2042's gameplay loop. Although again, it's nice to see they both acknowledge this pain point and are making attempts to fix it in Season 3 by grouping specialists under the 4 traditional classes and limiting gadgets as a result, much like the maps really should never have even been here to start with. And it remains to be seen how effective this class grouping will be, but I'm thinking it will only cause balance issues and frustration for those used to playing with their favorite characters with specific loadouts. Classes have been a staple feature of Battlefield Battlefield since its inception, and for good reason. With such a variety of large-scale gameplay elements, even the designers of Battlefield 1942 20 years ago knew that a class system would be necessary to balance out the mixed infantry and vehicle design that defines the series. Vehicles, of course, necessitated anti-vehicle options, longer sight ranges of the large maps necessitated longer range weapons, the capturing and defending of points necessitated defensive gadgets, and so on. By providing these solutions not to everyone but instead limiting them to defined roles on the battlefield, players were able to, ideally, work together as a team to fulfill different functions naturally, with different classes having advantages and trade-offs against others. It became impossible to be the one-man army that fit every situation. Now, it can be debated heavily how effective this system has been in each entry, but with 2042 this is just simply no longer the case. Now you can easily be a self-healing medic with a rocket launcher, or a self-supplying support with armor plates or a spawn beacon. The plus system, while novel, does add to this lone wolf design with the ability to quickly swap out ammo types and scopes for a variety of situations, removing the need for teammates that would fulfill that role even further. And I'm not even touching on the fact that specialists are shared across factions, and the disconnect between playing Falc and shooting a Falc and being revived by a Falc, or the cringy personalities, cosmetics, and end-of-round quips at launch.
Yeah, Angel does it again.
The teamwork, squad play, and overall gameplay elements of 2042 have suffered a lot from this. By and large, the specialist system introduced so many issues for 2042 that many players just rejected it outright. And these gadgets and abilities, in my mind mostly the wingsuit and grappling hook, have wreaked absolute havoc on the map design of 2042. The ability to fly across the map as a small, almost undetectable human-sized object, or grapple hook to areas inaccessible by anyone else, destroys any semblance of order or flow to the maps in pretty much every mode. If you want to see for yourself, then go play Stranded. This is stupidly apparent with that map and just how much of a disadvantage you are at if you don't play McKay. Secure flanks and front lines just really aren't a thing in 2042 at all, whereas Sundance can appear out of nowhere with a nice magazine full of bullets to stuff up your ass. While I appreciate attempts at innovation, this was just not the way to go about this, and it was so negatively received by the player base at large that I'm shocked that the specialists made it past the drawing board. Whether it was stubbornness to see their design come to light, or simple greed at attempting to get players attached to these characters and as a result, more likely to buy cosmetics for them, the specialist experiment has been a complete failure. The fact that a large focus of the recent updates is again reworks of existing maps, with every single map needing this treatment, and a large selling point of the upcoming season, the simple categorization of specialists into standard classes, are just other indicators of how poorly designed 2042 is from the ground up. Now, I said earlier in this video that Battlefield 2042 has all but been abandoned by the majority of DICE teams. While this isn't confirmed, the evidence is pretty compelling. Hazard Zone was a complete and total failure, a half-baked game mode that delivered another underwhelming and confused experience to players, and as a result was fully dropped by the team as they announced they would no longer be supporting it. Quick reminder, this is one of their 3 main game modes included with 2042. The one that many players were sold on and excited for just completely dropped, with only minor fixes and updates shoved out before it was taken out back with a shovel and put out of its misery. I genuinely enjoyed Battlefield 5's Firestorm, another failed Battle Royale experience, and thought it had a lot of potential, but Hazard Zone was just so bare bones and frankly boring that even I couldn't see any of that potential without a major rework. Portal, the game mode with by far the most potential and excitement, has received only small fixes and updates since launch, with a small handful of weapons being the only new piece of content this entire mode has received in an entire year. No new maps, no other legacy content from other titles, just nothing. I knew bringing content from other titles like Battlefield 2142 or Battlefield 1 into Portal was a tall order, but I never imagined how little we would actually get here. And this is probably one of the most disappointing aspects of 2042 to me, as I felt like Portal, a sandbox experience that showcased the best of the best that Battlefield had to offer, almost like a greatest hits of Battlefield experiences, is now just another empty shell of a game mode devoted to XP farms and filled with bots with only the rare, exceptional experience floating to the top periodically. I think back to some of the initial Portal previews, and I genuinely don't know if these modes are even possible to make. Like this image of a bunch of rangers being chased by an airplane, is this even possible? I'm actually asking, let me know in the comments below if it is. I have no idea. The lack of support, polish, and overall jankiness of the experiences has pretty much sealed the fate of this game mode as well. Sure, it feels pretty awesome to see Erika Harbor and Caspian Border again, but it just feels unfinished and soulless in so many ways that it's hard to take seriously as a fully complete game. Supposedly, Ripple Effect created this mode in under a year because they must have known how lackluster and slim the rest of 2042's offerings were, ever? And if that's the case, it's honestly pretty incredible what they were able to accomplish in that time. Can you imagine a ripple effect that had been given the time and resources to properly create this mode? It's really depressing to think about what may have been. While the future isn't set in stone for Battlefield 2042, I think I can make a pretty educated guess that support will be almost completely dropped after the contractual Season 4. They have already announced that each season will have the same level of content, so only 4 new maps for the entirety of this game's lifecycle is essentially confirmed. If DICE hadn't locked themselves in with this Year 1 pass and their 4 seasons of content, I honestly think support for 2042 would have already ended. It just cannot be profitable to devote the resources necessary to revitalize this game in any meaningful way. I honestly, truly hope I'm proven wrong, and Season 3 and 4 release with loads of new and interesting content and fixes, Portal receives some love and care and content, and a restructuring of how content is delivered is completed, but I won't be holding my breath. Even if we were to receive all this new awesome content, the framework it rests upon is just not good at all. It's still a janky, incoherent mess that has no unifying vision or design. 2042 is a slapdash of ideas thrown at the wall with DICE executives holding their breath to see what sticks. 1 year after launch, do I consider 2042 to be a good game? No, not at all. Is there dumb, arcadey fun to be had? Sure. And I'll continue to play it and produce content for it because at the end of the day, this remains one of my favorite franchises and why I started my channel. That being said, 2042 is a pale imitation of what a Battlefield game should be. I genuinely believe they've just lost way too much talent to deliver an experience like Battlefield 3 or 4 or 1 ever again. Whew! If you stuck around this long, props to you. As I wrote this, it just became more and more of a rant, so I apologize. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think of 2042 1 year later, or let me know how wrong I am. Thanks for watching. Until next time.